Good evening and welcome again to our Shiur of the Alshich and the week's Parsha. This week's Parsha is Chaya, which marks the passing of Zorah Imenu. This week's Shiur is also dedicated for Refuah Shlema for Chaim Lipa ben Chana, who should have indeed a Refuah Shlema. If you'd like to sponsor the Shiur for somebody to have a Refuah Shlema in the memory of somebody who's passed away or to celebrate Simcha, then please email me to yy@rabbiyyy.com, yy@rabbiyyy.com. And we'll be more than pleased to dedicate the Shiur to the person whose name you supply. This week's Seder, as I said, is Chaya. Now, the Alshich here is going to be, I think, is one of the most brilliantly observed Alshichs of all. However, I'd just like to start with a very important focus, perhaps, on where the Shiur is going to take us. And that is quite simply that if I was commissioned to Chas v'Shalom, do enormous damage to the Jewish people. I mean, critical damage to the Jewish people, arguably irrecoverable damage to the Jewish people. It would be to undermine their belief in their Rabbonim, their leaders, and I'm not obviously talking about myself, I'm talking the great rabbis of the generation, and to say that they're really not up to much. In fact, Rashi says in his commentary in Shoftim, it's the way of foolish people to say, the rabbis of today are not anywhere near as good as the rabbis as before. Now, what are you supposed to do with that accusation? I mean, maybe the doctors are not as good as doctors before, but would you not go to a doctor? Anyway, it's a ridiculous thing to say because you're sent the rabbis of your generation who understand the challenges of your generation because we all live in different times. And the challenges of people in the 19th century, the 18th century, the 17th century are radically different to us in the 21st century. And we're sent Rabbonim and leaders, the greats of the generation who understand us and our times. To shake that belief, to shake that fact, is to undermine the whole fabric of what the Jewish people is all about. So that's really where I'm taking you, or rather, I think the Alshich is taking you in their analysis, or his analysis, of Parshas Chaya. Chaya, of course, is after the Akedah Yitzchak we read about last week, the binding of Isaac. And everybody knows, I think, or lots of people know, let's put it that way, let's be accurate, that Avrohom Avinu was given 10 tests. And each one of the tests that he passes, he becomes a greater Avrohom Avinu until he reaches the zenith, the fulfillment of Avrohom Avinu at the end of Akedah Yitzchak. It says, Hashem calls out to him, Avrohom, Avrohom. And there's a line in between in the Chumash. It's part of our tradition for that line to be there. And what's the line doing there? It's telling you that the Avrohom before he passes this test is not as great as the Avrohom after he passes the test. Obviously, philosophically, Hashem doesn't need you to pass any tests because he knows that you can do it anyway. You're not letting him know by your success that you could succeed. He knows you could succeed. Hashem knows everything. So if that's the case, the obvious question, the classic question is, why does God give us any tests? And the answer is, yes, he knows, but you don't know. A person often grows in greatness by passing a test. After all, if life was full of easy things, then life would be full of no challenges and no growth would be available. So therefore, a test allows you to grow. Avram was given 10 tests. Avram grows according to passing those 10 tests. And which is the 10th test, the zenith of his growth? In the Gemara, in Pirkei Avos, there are various commentators here, and the classic ones are Rashi, the Rambam, Rabbeinu Yonah, and the Bartanura. It's interesting. The Rambam says, what is the ultimate test of Avram Avinu? Akedah Yitzchak, being told by Hashem to take his son, his only son, to sacrifice him, to cut his throat and burn his body to a crisp as an offering to Hashem. Yeah, I would agree. Rashi says the same thing. But somebody called Rabbeinu Yonah of Grodno. Grodno is just north of Barcelona, very near the French frontier. Rabbeinu Yonah, whose famous work, Shari Tshuva, is still learned extensively in yeshivas today. Classic work of Musar. Rabbeinu Yonah says that no, the ultimate test of Avrohom Avinu was not the 10th test that people think Akedah Seal at the end of last week's Sedra. It's the test that we find at the beginning of this week's Sedra, where Avrohom could not easily secure a place to bury Sarah, his wife. Very strange comment. I mean, to not be able to bury your wife, whom you've been married to for over 100 years, is obviously going to be unpleasant, to put it mildly. But you can't compare that to the test of taking your son, your only son, at God's command and killing him and burning him. That's why on earth just having difficulty getting a piece of real estate to bury Sarah Rabbeinu? Why is that? And how can Rabbeinu Yonah possibly say that's the ultimate test? That's what the Alshich is going to take us in and show us in this week's analysis of the text. And I think I've said to you before in this weekly Parsha Shiur, one of the great discoveries through learning the Parsha through the eyes of the Alshich is the simple and obvious fact that if you're not studying the text in the original, effectively you're not studying the text. Every translator is a commentator. I've translated 5 classic Hebrew books. When you're translating it, a word might have several implications, and maybe the author wants all of those several implications to be part of the story, and that's why he chose that particular word, because it carries those various implications. But I can't find sometimes a word in English which indeed completely parallels that Hebrew word with those several implications. And so what I have to do as the translator is to choose the one that I think is the one that is the most appropriate. In so doing, I'm dropping the other possible translations and freezing it so that I've lost those implications. Similarly, when it comes to studying the Chumash with the Alshich, you get a very, very acute awareness of this, looking at the Torah through his eyes, by contrasting and comparing the English translation. When you look at the English translation, it may be a fabulous English translation, but you're often losing the other implications simply by the fact you translated it into a different language. It freezes, it limits, it zeroes in one translation and ejects and rejects the other ones. By so doing, it limits. It turns something which is multidimensional into something which is, well, one-dimensional. And that's to certainly seriously diminish what the Torah is saying. So we'll see that particularly when we go and look, as we're going to do in a second when I share the screen with you, in the story of Avram and Sarah and their last journey together when he buries his wife. So I think at that point I really should share the screen with you so that you'll see exactly what I'm trying to say, because a picture shares or tells 1,000, what's the word? Picture paints 1,000 words. That's the word I was looking for. I'm afraid I didn't take a very good picture of this, but let's just quickly rush through it to remind yourself of what's going on. In fact, we'll just read it in English, and you'll see why in a second. I'll come back to the Hebrew shortly. Sarah's lifetime was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. Rashi says, why did it say 100 years and 20 years and 7 years? Why the years, just say 127? And he says, because which is 100 years, she was as free from sin as somebody who's 20. Up until 20, you're not guilty for anything you did wrong, according to the heavenly court. So she was flawless. And her beauty at 20 was the same as the beauty of somebody who's 7 years of age. I saw the commentator, this thing is cut off here, in the art scroll when I was taking this screenshot. He says, because a 7-year-old doesn't need to wear makeup. One of the classic commentators says that, to enhance her beauty. So anyway, fine. So that's one commentary. The years of Sarah's life. And Sarah died in Kiryas Arba, which is Hebron in the land of Canaan, and Abram came to eulogize Sarah and to bewail her. Livkosa is the Hebrew over here. If you look over here, can you see that there? It's got a little cough. It's got a star above it. A little cough. Why has it got a little cough? And Rashi says because, of course, every parting, anybody who passes away, no matter how long you've lived with them, no matter how old they've become, there's a sadness there. But when somebody's lived to be 127, and indeed it's a life of fulfillment, as I mentioned to you in our previous sharing, when I sign copies of my own books, I very often write inside the book the best blessing I can possibly give anybody, which is you should have a life of achievement. Well, Sarah has had a life of achievement. Her 127 years are superb. So, of course, he cries for the loss of a wife, as the Ramban says. Whenever you part from somebody, whether they're getting in a train, a bus, or a plane, and somebody you love, and you miss them already, you start to cry. Certainly when they go on a slightly longer journey, and it's the one to heaven, then of course you start to cry. But it's sad, but it's a celebration at the same time. This is quite a life. Anyway, let's see what happens next. Avrohom rose up from the presence of his dead and spoke to the children of Heth, saying, I'm an alien and resident amongst you. Grant me an estate for a burial site with you, that I may bury my dead from before me. And so it goes on. But without the Hebrew, you're just not going to understand at all what that's all about. So even though this is not very well photographed by me, I'm hoping I can make it better, because we really do need to look at the Hebrew. Okay, before I tell you the Hebrew, there's two important principles that I think we have to understand in order to be able to really decode this whole story. The first is, Avram is going to ask people to bend the law or change the law in order to allow him, who is a foreigner, to buy property, to buy land in their country. There are many countries today that do not allow people who are not citizens to buy land in that country. You have to be registered as a citizen to do so. In Switzerland, if you wanted to move, I'm living in the United States of America. If I want to move from New York to Chicago, I move to New York to Chicago. In Switzerland, the small states, the statelets, the cantons as they're called, that make up the Federation of Switzerland. If I want to move from German-speaking Switzerland, let's say Zurich, to Lucerne, French-speaking Switzerland, I have to apply to the local government to be able to move there. In the same way as I want to move to the United States of America, I need to get a green card or some sort of application for citizenship. Then only then can I become a citizen. Well, in that country, unless you were a citizen, you couldn't own property. And he wants to own property. He wants a place to bury Sarah, and not just any place, as we'll see in a second. He wants Morris and Machpelah. So that's the first thing. You've got to understand that the law of the country was that foreigners, aliens, were not allowed to own property. Avram is going to appeal to them to change that law. Point number one. Point number two, we have to understand a Hebrew word, which is a little bit puzzling. If I scroll down here, I will show you one of them. This word here. Can you see it? The word S, Aleph, Sof. Very interesting word because it's got the first letter in it of the alphabet and the last letter, S. And what does S mean? So S normally has no translation whatsoever. If we're compelled to translate it, we translate it as with. But normally it doesn't translate. It just almost hovers. But of course, nothing in the Torah is there unless it teaches you something. So even if we don't translate it, it must have a function, and indeed it does. The function of the word S is to tell you that something else is included in the message of the posuk, and the message of the verse. It's talking about something, but there's something else. The Hebrew is S as a reboy. It includes something else. If that sounds a bit abstract, don't worry, I'm going to bring that to life very shortly. But again, you're going to have to see, you're going to see that you have to see the Hebrew to get the message here, because in English you couldn't talk about S at all. It just doesn't translate. So let's see. So this is what he says. This is now the Hebrew. Vayokam Avram me'al pnei Mesa, I'll translate it my way, slightly different to the art scroll. And Avram got up from his dead, from Sarah, and he speaks to the Bnei Ches. We'll talk about the Bnei Ches in a second. Oh, maybe I'll just tell you straight out that in the city, in Kiryas Arba, which is Hebron, you can visit Hebron today, might not be such a clever idea, but one could, theoretically. If you go to Hebron today, then basically, it's a dangerous place, as you probably know. You've got to be careful before you say out to Hebron. But if you went to go to visit people in Hebron, then you would understand that that city is an Arab city. not welcoming to Jews, though of course there's a Jewish quarter part of it. However, the point I'm trying to make is as follows, that it was foreign territory to Avram in those days. So he speaks to the Bnei Ches. The Bnei Ches are the town council, the leadership of the city, the local government. And he says, I'm a foreigner and I'm a stranger amongst you. But please give me a place which I can possess to bury my dead imachem amongst you. So here's exactly what I was saying. It's against the law, something that they don't normally allow, but he's asking them to change the law. The ekbara, and I will bury Mesi, my dead, Milphonai, from before me. Now let's see the reaction of the local politicians. So the answer is Avrohom. Here's the first occurrence of a word S. So the answer Avrohom, just Avrohom? No. We'll see in a second. There were other people there too, who they want to hear what they're saying. They're more like to say to him, Shoma'ini Adoni, listen, my master, Nasi Elokim Atov Eslachena, you're a prince of God living amongst us. The Mifil Kavrina, from the very best of the burial plots, Kavar Es Mesecha, bury S, and see the word S there? Bury Es Mesecha. Now, he's going to get one dead person there, and that is his wife Sarah. But of course, Avram doesn't want the place that he wants, which is called Maras Machpelah, the cave of Machpelah. Avram doesn't want the cave of Machpelah just to bury Sarah. One member of his family has passed away. He wants as a possession a family vault where he can bury everybody in his family, his son Yitzchak, his son Yaakov, their wives, although Rachel doesn't get buried there, she's the only one who doesn't get buried there. He wants it for his family to be able to be buried there. So they say to him, see, Avram just said that I can bury Mesi. But they say, listen, my master, the very best places nobody would withhold from me to kvar es Mesecha. Not only can you bury Sarah, but you can have it as a burial spot, es Mesecha. Es more than the subject of the verse. Mesecha is Sarah, but es Mesecha. Anybody else he can bury there as well. Ishmael, and none of us, es Kivroi, his burial place, his burial plot, lo asichla memchomik for Mesecha. Nobody will withhold it from you to bury Mesecha, you're dead. V'yakam Avram v'ishtakol amo oretz. And Amram gets up and he bows down to the Amhorites, to the ordinary people, the Bnei Ches, and to the Bnei Ches. Now, the Bnei Ches, as I said, were the leaders, the politicians. And why suddenly bowing down to two groups of people, the ordinary people? Well, as I said, these are the rulers and the leaders of the people, and they're sitting in judgment. This is the city hall, the town council. And in the ancient world, certainly in Jewish cities, then the law courts were always situated at the gates of the walls of the city, the entrance to the city, so that people who might be in dispute and were looking for a judge to settle a case could easily get access to law. That's certainly in Parshas Shoftim, it's talked about in the Torah, make sure that the justice and courts are freely available to people for people to access. And you don't have to pay millions and millions of dollars as you do in the United States in order to get a trial heard. Or get the wheels turning in order to have your case heard. So this is local government in action, or maybe government in action. Maybe they saw themselves as a whole state. But people are there, just like they have in court cases. People come to watch what's going on. And Avram bows down to the rulers who very kindly, generously said, you can have much more than you're asking for. But he also bows down to the audience, the ordinary people who are watching, because he's asking them to bend or change the rules for him. And it's all very well for the leaders, for the elite to say, okay, we have no difficulty with that. But what about the ordinary people? History is filled with examples of kings or emperors who were all powerful or extraordinarily powerful. And it's just that they ran foul of the view of the populace, of the people. After all, there is no King of France anymore. The people beheaded him. he got it wrong in his relationship with the people. There's no Tsar of Russia anymore. Same story. There's no Shah of Iran anymore. Same story. There is no Kaiser. And incidentally, Kaiser, Shah, and Tsar all come, if you think about it, from the word Caesar. They're all derivatives of Caesar. And certainly in the Roman Empire, many Caesars were killed and assassinated because they ran foul of the popular will. And Avrohom, therefore, is an astute politician. This is wonderful to have such a warm reception to your request from the people who run the city. But what about the ordinary people? What if they don't agree? So he bows down to them as well, wisely making sure that they are on board, if you like. So Avrohom comes out and he bows down, he gets up, and he bows down to the ordinary people and to the rulers. Fine. Now he says to them, if it really pleases you, leak for S Macy, that I can bury not just one, but my whole family there. Then listen to me. Ephraim ben Sochar. And please appeal to me to somebody called Ephraim ben Sochar. Because Avrohom has got a particular place he wants to buy. And we mentioned that before. It's called Maris and Machpelah. And the particular reason he wants to buy it is because somebody's already buried there. Rather, two people are buried there. And he wants to be buried there as well. Because the two people are buried there in Midrashic tradition is Adam and Chava. And in Kabbalistic tradition, Avram and Sarah are reincarnations of Adam and Chava. As it were, they want to go back to where they came from. So this specific place that he wants to buy, this cave, this burial cave, is owned by a fellow called Ephraim ben Sochar. Now, this is a perfect example of how, if we were just looking at this in the English, this would totally mislead us. And let's just do that to get a feel of what's going on here. Okay, if it's truly your will to bury my dead from before me, heed me and intercede with me, with Ephraim the son of Zohar. Zohar. Let him grant me the cave of Machpelah, which is his, and the edge of his field. Let him grant it to me for his full price in your midst as an estate in the burial place. Now Ephraim was sitting in the midst of the Bnei Ches, and Ephraim the Hittite responded to Avram in the hearing of the children of Heth, for all those who came to the gate of his. Let me just shrink that and bring up the next one so we can continue the story. And you'll see the point I'm trying to make about how the English is going to mislead you. So he's saying, no, my lord, heed me. I'm giving you the field. And as for the cave that's in it, I'm giving it to you as well. Have that. In the view of the children of my people, I've been giving it to you. Bury your dead. Well, just reading it in English, what sort of fellow does Ephraim ben Sochar, or Ephraim, what did it say? I can't remember what it said in English. Ephraim, the son of Zohar. What sort of fellow does good old Ephraim sound like? This is a nice guy. Pay me for it, do me a favor. I mean, just take it for goodness sake. I mean, but that is to totally miss the whole story, because you only get the story if you read the Hebrew. And it really is important to get a basic understanding, or at least of a guide who can guide you and point out, hopefully as I'm doing now, exactly why the Hebrew is so important. Let's go back to the original, so we don't lose any of the aspects of the words or any of the implications of the words. So he says, again, I'll translate it my way again. So please appeal to me to Ephraim ben Sochar, V'yitem li Yismaros Machpelah, and he should give me the cave of Machpelah, Asher lo, which he owns, Asher, which is his, Asher b'kitzis at the edge of his field. B'kesef money for the full price. He should give it to me. I'm paying full price here, top dollar. B'sel chechim l'chuzas kever, to be in a chuzas kever, to be a family burial place. The Ephraim Yosha b'sel b'nei Ches, Ephraim was sitting here the whole time. The Yan Ephraim lachiti es Avram, and he answers Avram. So that the people hear. The call boy Shiur to everybody coming into the city. Remember, that's, as we said before, the ordinary people. And he says the following. If I move this over, yeah, and he says, I'll make this a bit bigger. I think we would all benefit from it being a bit bigger. Yes, I'll do. Of course, I have to squish the page over to do that. I don't know, I was making this funny thing. Good. And he says, Lord, and he, no, my master Shemaini, listen to me. I give you the field. And the cave that's inside it, I give that to you as well. In the eyes of my people, I give it to you. Very your dad. Indeed, a very nice sounding guy. But I would like to pause for a second and invite you to see this pasuk through the eyes of the Alshich. I'm going to have to think here a little bit. Something wrong. Let's look at it again. See if you can spot what's wrong. Lo Adoni, no my master. Shemaini, listen to me. Hasadi Nasati. I give you the field. And the cave that's in it, have that as well. In the eyes of my people, anybody army, and I give it to you, Kvar Mesech. Bury your dead. Anything strike you as strange about what Ephron says to Avram's request for the cave of Machpelah? Avram didn't mention the field. Avram didn't want to buy the field. Avram wanted to buy the cave, which was at the edge of the field. And he didn't want to buy the field. So why does he suddenly Ephron start talking about the field? I'll give you the field. See, because Avram wants to sell the cave, but he wanted to sell the field as well. Sorry, Ephron wants to sell the field, the cave, but he wants to sell the field as well. Now we're seeing, now I'm not a businessman. If you've ever seen two businessmen negotiating, it's a dance. It's almost comical. I cannot do this. They barter, they bargain, they go up, they go down, they make dramatic gestures, all this sort of stuff. I can't play that game. I'm just hopeless at that. But Ephron can, and so can Avrohom. So, interestingly, let's look at the nice guy, Mr. Ephron again. Lord Ani Shemaini. Listen, I'll give you the field. The cave is in it. I can have that as well. Let anybody on me in the eyes of my people. I give it to you. Kavar Mesecha. Kavar Mesecha, not Es Mesecha, which we saw before. Es Mesecha is what they told them. You're not going to see that in the English, but if we go over there to the Hebrew, that we were looking at before, he says to them, he says to the other people, and he said to them, oh wow, you said that I can bury my whole family. In that case, I want the Morris Machpelah. Could you ask him if he'll sell it to me for a proper price? I'll pay him a decent price, top dollar. And he turns around and says, no, and he sounds so nice. He sounds so sweet. What a nice fellow. I'll give it to you. And you can have the cave. You can have the field in the cave. To bury Mesecha. Just Sora. He doesn't say it with a grimace. It's just, bury your dead. Doesn't say S. He's implying just what Avram doesn't want. Just a place to bury Sora, which, as we said before, is not what he wants. He wants a place for his whole family. Watch. So Avram bows down to the ordinary people. Why does he bow down again? Why does he try to, as it were, pull them back? Because Ephraim tried to pull them away. What did he say before? Listen, I'm giving it to you in the eyes of Bnei Ami, my ordinary people here. He's appealing to them. I'll give this Jew boy, the cave for one burial. Don't worry. I'm not letting the Jews take over our country, control the media, control the economy. No, don't you worry. I'll make sure this Jew's under control. So Avram bows down to the same people that Ephron's trying to recruit for his campaign to limit what Avram can have. At least limit what Avram can have for no money. It's funny, I live in an area where it was originally a Jewish area, and then the Jews who were not religious Jews, who were sort of secular, moved out. Italians moved in. This is about 60 years ago. And then now religious Jews are moving in. And a lot of the Italians, who are remarkably frank in their discomfort with other racial groups, a lot of them are unpleased, to put it mildly, that Jews are moving in here until they get to sell their house to a Jew. There's a sort of Jew tax. It's unspoken, but they know they're going to get a lot more money from a Jewish person keen to move into a growing Jewish neighborhood than they would from anybody else. At that point, they're sort of like, they can put up with the Jews if you're making a lot of money out of them. So he wants to seem like a nice guy, Mr. Ephron. And he's perfectly willing to give it to him to only bury Sarah, unless, of course, he can get a lot of money out of him. Then he can have the rest, as you'll see in a second. We talk about Avram at Lifnei Hamoris, and Avram bows down to the ordinary people. Yadaber al Ephron, and he hears exactly what Ephron's up to, and he says, "But Oznei Amoritz in the ears of the people live are so that they can hear. Ach im ata lo sheveni, if you only listen to me, nasati kes nasati, I'll give you the money for the field." You give him the money for the field. He didn't want the money for the field. Where did that come from? It came from him. But Avram's worked out that when he said, "Oh, I'll give you the field," who mentioned field? He wants to sell the field. Okay, if that's what it takes in order to buy the cave, good. I'll buy the field as well. I'll buy your field as well. Good. Nosati kesel asodi kach memeni, take it from me. The etbara es mesi shama, and then I'll be able to bury es mesi, not just Sora, but the rest of my family. And now we see the real Ephron. V'yan Ephron as Avram, and Avram, and Ephron replies to Avram, S, and also the people watching. The Marla said to him, Adoni, Shema'ini, listen, Eretz Arba Me'ez Shekel Kesef, a piece of land worth 400 silver coins, between you and me. What's that? The S Me'secha Kabor. The S Me'secha Kabor. This is the first time that he has said the word S. And was this field worth 400 shekels? No, only a small fraction of that. But he wants to sell it. And he knows that he's got Avram over a barrel, as it were. So he demands a ridiculous price. And Avram, knowing what's going on, Bishma Avram, and Avram listens. He hears what he's saying. El Ephron Bishkal Avram Ephron Esakesef. Avram counts out the money. He said in front of the people, Arba Mishak Kesef, over at Soka, the full amount, top dollar, the Yokam Hasod El Ephraim. Asher Machpelah, Asher Neymar Asadi, Amora Sherboy, Kolo Eitz Asher Besodi, Shabakol Giver, and all the property passes to Avram. It's actually quite funny, I suppose. But the important point is this. At the end of last week's Parsha, at the end of Akedah Skitzkog, Avram Avinu has reached such a high level that a heavenly voice calls out and says, Avram, 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 don't stretch your hand out to the lad, don't do anything to him. God's talking directly to him. He was a prophet before, but now he's reached the ultimate level of prophecy. Wow. But he's still, even though he's got his head in the heavens and he can talk to angels, he's still got his feet firmly on the ground. He knows how to deal with a crook and a phony, and somebody appeals, what's this between you and me? Have it, not what you want to do. He knows how to deal with this world, the people in this world, the good and the bad and the ugly. He knows how to deal with the businessman. It's one of the best ways you could possibly undermine the Jewish people's faith in their religion and the leaders of the religion to say that they are, the Yiddish phrase is Luftmenschen, people with their heads in the clouds, people who are not realistic, not pragmatic, don't know the day-to-day concerns of ordinary people. So what's the point of going to somebody who doesn't understand you? You should know that the very greatest of the Jewish people have their feet firmly on the ground. They know exactly what our lives are, because maybe not too long ago, our lives were their lives, just that they've gone so much higher and they know so much more. But don't think that they are disconnected from us and they live in ivory towers and, they're floating through the air, through life, unaware of what we are struggling with. That's simply not true. Rabbeinu Yonah says the ultimate test is this test. But you can't compare it to the drama, to the story of the binding of Isaac. No, you can't. But the story of the binding of Isaac is only testimony to the fact that Avram Avinu reached the highest possible spiritual levels. But if he still doesn't stay connected to the earth, if that journey to the highest spiritual levels disconnected him from the world that you and I live in, then he's no good to us. No, the greats of the Jewish people retained and were anchored and stay connected to this world, to you and I. And we can go to them consequently with our problems, with our concerns, with our plans, to talk it over with them, fully aware and fully confident that they understand. Even if they've reached the 10th test of the binding of Isaac, they still know how to negotiate a business deal and to deal with a phony and to deal with the fraud. They still are truly the greats, head in the heavens, heart with the Jewish people, and feet firmly on the ground. I shall see you next week. Have a very, very good, safe, successful week and a wonderful Shabbos.